Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Helen and Dirk for including our paper in the program. This is a joint work with Jeff and Ben. In this paper, we study the effect of personal income tax on executive compensation. In practice, executive compensation has attracted a lot of attention by investors, regulators, politicians, and the public. There are also a large amount of literature in this field. According to a survey study by Edmonds, Gabi, and Jenter 2017, there are mainly three branches in this field. It's shareholder value maximization, rent extraction, and institutional forces, including the tax policies. Our paper belongs to the third branch. We focus on the personal income tax, the effect. Related studies are mainly on federal level personal income tax and find negligible effects on executive compensation, which may not be surprising, right? If the managers don't want to move abroad, there may not better offset option to get around the federal level pay. But in the US, for the personal income tax, there is indeed a second component, which is at the state level income tax. And intuitively, it is easier for managers to move to another state than moving abroad. So this might give them better bargaining power in a pay negotiation, right? And from a empirical perspective, in this state level setting would give us a better empirical setting. When some states or one state get a pay the shock to the personal income tax at the state level, other states may not. So other states could be used as a control group in the DID analysis. So in this paper, we study the effect of personal income tax at state level on executive compensation. Oops. So this map shows the state level marginal individual income tax rates in 2020, the top band, right? As we can see, the state level personal income tax rates are usually smaller than the federal level. But for some states like California, it still could be as high as 13.3%. Usually varying from about 3% to more than 10%, right? And some states have no state level personal income tax, like in Florida, Texas, and Nevada. But does that matter? Right? We do have some evidence it matters. In practice, people tend to move from high tax regions to low tax regions. Such relocation actually could bring some real effects on state level tax revenues, right? There are some evidence shows such relocation could bring an extra $4.1 billion tax revenue to Florida, and similarly, on the other side, it could bring some tax losses, $4.5 billion for California. At the individual level, we also have some evidence like recently, Elon Musk moved from California to Texas in 2020. There are also some discussions that this decision may be related with the personal income tax. So what would be our predictions? Or to think about that. If we think of the federal level studies, right, basically shows negligible effects. And when we think of a state level, the magnitude of state level tax rate would be even smaller. Maybe it would also have no significant effects, right? And anyway, for the managers, it would be costly to negotiate higher pay, or they could find alternative ways to get around the larger impact from a higher tax rate at state level. But at the same time, it's also intuitive for managers who want higher pay, because higher personal income tax means they have lower after-tax pay, especially when they want to compare their pay with their industry peers in other states without such changes in pay in tax rates. Of course, in practice, whether they could get higher pay may depend on factors like bargaining power or the governance quality or the agency problem. So our design in this paper, this is an empirical paper, our design, we use large shocks to U.S. state level personal income tax rates. Following Hyde and Youngquist 2015, we define large shocks as those tax changes no less than 1 percentage point, increases or decreases. And then we carry out a difference in difference analysis. The treated group includes the CEOs of firms headquartered in states with large tax shocks. And the remaining CEOs in our sample are the control group. One challenge is about the repeated shocks. So for one state, for example, in 1 year, it has a large tax increase. In the following years, there could be another large tax shock or increases or decreases, right? This we call the repeated shocks, which is different from the typical event study where the treated group would only be treated once, but here it could have repeated tricks. So we follow the literature, the paper by Hyde and Youngquist 2015, and we use first difference setting to deal with this repeated shock issue. But our findings are robust to a stacked DID setting, right? But in this setting, we would lose more than half our large tax increase shocks. Well, when tax rate changes, it's usually not practical to adjust the pay immediately in the same year. If anything would happen, it's likely to happen in 1 year or 2 years later. This is our specification. On the left-hand side, the dependent variable is YMT, is some could be total pay, could be component of pay for manager M in year T. The main regressor on the left-hand side, right? On the left-hand side is this indicator variables for tax shocks. Could be tax increases, tax decreases 1 year ago and 2 years ago. This is our basic setting. We include CEO firm fixed effects and industry and year fixed effects. This is our basic setting. Here are some details of our tax shocks. In our sample period, which is from 1992 to 2022, we have in total 371 tax shocks, but most of them are pretty small changes, unlikely to have significant impact on CEO pay. As mentioned, our focus is on the large changes, more than 1 percentage point. We have 46 large changes, including 27 large increases and 19 large decreases. We first check the pre-trends, right? The pre-trends for tax increases and tax decreases, respectively. This figure is the pre-trend figure for tax increases. What we do here, we look at the change in pay, which is the left-hand side of our DID regressions. The left-hand side. Then we compare, we calculate the difference of that variable for treated in the control group and show the mean of that difference. As we can see, in years before the shock, the difference between treated and the control group are not significant, supporting the parallel trend assumption. But 2 years after the large shock, we observe a significant increase in pay. Similarly, we do that for tax decrease. Again, we find supportive evidence for pre-trend, but something different here is in the year following the shock, we don't observe any significant change. So this is for pre-trends. Here are the main results of our DID analysis. If we look at column 1 here, we mainly focus on the tax increases 1 year, 2 years ago, and we find only 2 years after the large tax shock increase, we observed a significant increase in in pay. In column 2, we focus on tax decreases, right? And nothing happened there. We observe nothing. This is a bit interesting, right? So it's like if you're CEO, when personal income tax rate change, when the increase, you got higher pay. When the decrease, nothing happened. So CEO pay would likely to be like a monotonically increase, never decreasing. And if we put together in column 3, it's consistent. What we call here is like a symmetric effect, of personal income tax on executive compensation. We also run a bunch of robustness checks. In this state level DID analysis, a typical concern is the difference in the local economic conditions between treated and the control group, right? What do we do here? We only use the neighbor states as the control states, and we rerun our DID analysis, and we find consistent results. Another concern could be the tax shocks themselves. Are they really exogenous, right? This is a typical question in a talk. Well, this is a fair concern because it's unlikely any tax shock could happen for no reason. But it's also challenging to claim a shock is completely exogenous. What do we do here? We follow the literature and use a narrative approach to identify some likely exogenous shocks, which we follow the Roman 2010 and identify the exogenous shocks, and we only use these shocks as our treatment, and we rerun the test and we find consistent results. We also redo this analysis in a stacked DID setting, and we also get consistent results. The treatment effect varies between 5.8% to 8.4%. 2 years following the large tax increases, and nothing happened for tax decreases. We now try to identify or quantify the tax effect on executive compensation, right? What do we do here? We use this elasticity model following the framework by Friedman and Malloy 2011. And as we can see the specification here, the key element on the right-hand side is NOT, which is net of tax rate. So it's nothing different from this like after-tax portion of the pay, right? And the key regressor is we could say it's a change or the ratio of this NOT rate, or in reverse of that. The results shows that for 1% decrease in this net tax rate ratio, or reverse of that, 1% decrease in that ratio, or reverse of that ratio, due to the increase in personal income tax, we find it is associated with 0.7 to 0.9 percentage point increase in pay, which means in practice, when there are large tax changes, the most of the new tax burden of CEO's personal income would be absorbed by companies through higher pay. This is shows some quantity. We next show some like cross-sectional evidence for the underlying mechanisms, right? We mentioned the two mechanisms, the bargaining power, right? And the agency issues, right? Here is the evidence for bargaining power. We consider 3 dimensions. The first dimension is the connection between the CEO and the company. If it has very close tie with the firm, and anyway, this guy is unlikely to move. We don't give them higher pay. I'm just joking. So this is the basic idea. And what do we do here? We compare the founder CEOs versus non-founder CEOs. Non-founder CEOs are likely to have weaker tie and more likely to leave, so they might get higher pay rise. And as shown in by the first column, we find consistent evidence. The second dimension we consider is offset options, right? When the CEOs have more offset options, they are more likely to move and tend to have higher pay. We measure the offset option by the number of firms in the same industry, right? And then column 2 shows indeed for CEUs with higher with more offset options, we have the larger treatment effect. The third dimension we consider is performance, right? The performance of CEO of the firm. So for CEO with better performance, she is likely to have a more stronger bargaining power, and the companies are also wanted to keep those guys, those talent CEOs, and give them higher pay. This is a fundamental idea. We measure performance by profit margin or the mark-to-book ratio, as shown by the column 3 and 4. We find consistent evidence. This is basically the evidence for the bargaining power channel. We next show evidence for agency problem channel. So the idea is like for firms with weaker governance, those managers are likely to get higher pay if they got any chance to ask for more, right? And we found consistent evidence for firms with weaker governance measured by higher E index or lower board independence, right? We find consistent evidence for these firms with weaker governance, with the treatment effect is stronger, consistent with the agency problem channel. We next look into the components of the pay. In the previous slides, it's mainly about the total pay. Now we look into the components. In recent years, there are two most important components. The first is the stock pay, right, as shown by the red curve. And the second is the non-equity incentive pay, as shown by the green curve here. And when we look into the components of the pay, use them as the left-hand side, we find the increase in the pay mainly concentrates in these two components, which is likely to give stronger incentive to managers and then may not be bad companies, right? Even though the company could pay more, but the managers also get stronger incentive. We also looked at the compensation by non-CEO executives, right? We also have those data, and we found consistent results. And similarly, 2 years before, 2 years following a large tax increases, we observe the significant increase, at least in column 3, right? That means the evidence is there, but weaker. If we look at the magnitude is much smaller than that for CEO compensation, as shown in column 3. It's less than half of that. But similarly, we find a symmetric effect for tax decreases. We find no significant effects. So the last piece of evidence is from international setting. What we do here, we collect the data for CEO compensation and the national tax shocks for 21 countries, including the US. And it's a long list. And we have 14 tax increases and non-tax this is also large increases. 14 large increases and 9 large decreases across 2011 and 2022. This period. We find consistent results in this international setting. As we can see here in column 1, it shows like 2 years following a large tax increases, we observe a significant trade effect. And in column 2 again, asymmetric effects, no significant effects following a large tax decreases. If we compare the magnitude of this treatment effect, right? So it looks a bit larger than that for state level evidence. But remember, these tax shocks at national level usually have a larger magnitude. If we consider this factor, if we consider this effect, we look at the per unit impact of the tax changes. Right? We would find that relative impact is actually larger at the state level increase. Right? I think yeah, I would not overtime this time, right? I conclude by this slide. In this paper, we study the effect of personal income tax on executive compensation, and we find 2 years following large tax increases, CUP got a significant increase, but nothing happened following large decreases, which we call the asymmetric effect. And this impact mainly concentrate on the incentive pay, like non-equity incentive pay or stock pay, and factors like bargaining power and agency problem matter. And in practice, seems the company will try to tend to cover most of the high tax burden due to the higher tax rate. We find consistent but weaker results for non-CEO executive pay, and also consistent evidence in an international setting. I think that's all what I want to talk. I'm looking forward to Ben's discussion. Thank you.